أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا وحبيبنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah. Thank you. Welcome everybody for the second class of Purification of the Heart. We're going to, inshallah, today actually dive into the text. We had an assignment last week to cover the first 4, I believe, or 5 diseases. So I wanted to jump right in. Before actually we do that, last week, because alhamdulillah it was an introduction class, and I really do want to hear from all of you, I kind of made a general statement in the beginning saying all questions are welcome anytime. We found though, because we're recording the class and we do have students watching it, it did cause some editing issues because the mic, right? They can't hear the question. There's a lot of gaps. So what I'm going to ask for you to do today is hold your questions until the end for the Q&A portion, okay? If there's a point that you need clarification on about the text, that's fine. Like if you need, oh, can you please repeat that? That's different. But if there's a specific question or something personal that's not necessarily on the, the material that we're covering, but you just wanted to ask about, I ask that you please reserve those questions for the end in the Q&A session, inshallah. Okay, just because it helps with the editing of the video for the recording. Okay, so welcome again, everybody. I do have some handouts for you. If someone can please help pass these out. This is just, it's actually a list of the diseases of the heart that we're going to be covering. Some of the ones on here aren't exactly the ones in the book, but that's okay. It's a reference for you, sort of like a glossary of terms for a quick review if you need to look up something real quick. And also if you want to just take side notes on certain things, feel free. This was actually put together by our very own Shaykh Rami. He was kind enough to share it with me when he heard I was teaching the class to benefit all of you. So please keep him in your dua. He's also, as you remember, the one who wrote the biography on Imam Al-Maulud that we shared last week. So, alhamdulillah. Now, with that said, I think we're ready to begin, inshallah. So the reading assignment that we had for last week was to continue reading the introduction, right, which is a few pages long, the commentary, and then to go through the first 4, maybe 5 diseases if we can get to all of those. So the introduction to this text, did anybody have any specific questions or anything related to the introduction? If so, again, we can talk about that now, or if you want to reserve it for the end, that's fine. But I did have a few points that I had highlighted just to reiterate what we talked about last week with regards to shame. If you remember, we kind of spoke a little bit about the importance of everybody, of not suppressing the internal shame that we all have, right? That's part of our fitrah, it's part of the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. So to actually allow for remorse to settle into the heart, to feel guilt, and to not fall into despair, of course, but to just sit with that feeling of discomfort as a means of, again, drawing closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because with the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the one who repents, making tawbah should not, constrict us, right? If you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the repentant, it should actually be an opportunity that you seek to draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes it's hard to, if everything is going great in life. I mean, gratitude, of course, is a great, means to also, reflect and to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But sometimes it does help to, sit in solitude, face the qibla, be in a place of, pure, or be in a state of purity, and just think back on whatever you've done that you're not necessarily happy about, that you've done, and then let that remorse settle in, but then go to that awareness that, Ya Allah, you're so forgiving, and and the fact that you've told us, you know, that even if your sins accumulate, you know, like the foam of the ocean, that as long as we're in this state of remorse and guilt and you know, real true desire to repent, that we're beloved to you. That's so beautiful, because, you know, in many of our cultures, unfortunately, we're not taught that, right? In many of our cultures, we're taught to just be ashamed of ourselves. Once you do anything that is blameworthy or bad, it's like a scarlet letter branded on you, and you just have to walk around with your head hung low and feeling horrible about yourself. And certain groups, I think, feel that a lot more. You know, certain cultural backgrounds, I feel like they do really shame people a lot more than others, but it's unfortunately something that's very common. And I deal with this a lot with, you know, I do spiritual counseling, so I have a lot of people that come to me because they can't get over something, you know, that maybe their parents told them, you know, when they were younger, or just something that they've done because they've been conditioned to think that they're spoiled, you know, that they're rotten now because of whatever it was that they did. And it's hard for them to get over that. And I've had people reach out to me even on social media asking, how do you get over a past sin? Like, I know God's the most forgiving, I know all that, but I just can't seem to forgive myself, right? And it's a lot of it, like I said, has to do with culture and family. So it's really nice to just distance yourself from all of that and realize, and this chapter addresses that, you know, shame with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a good thing. And it's an opportunity to really feel His love, to just know that you are being, you know, enveloped in that moment, and that you are more beloved to Him than the one who worships beautifully. So I think it's really good to reflect on that section. And that's why, like Imam Al-Haddad, on my book, sorry, I do have the new book, but I was still referencing my old book because I was writing notes. But the section where he talks about dhul, right, which is to feel humbled, that's related. You know, once you are in the practice of you know, feeling repentant, it should put you in this state of humility. And this is what we all want. In order to proceed with this purification process, this is why we're doing this. We're going through this cleansing, pre-cleansing sort of process of really seeing ourselves, you know, in truth, right? Sometimes when you're looking at, you know, in certain mirrors, they're unforgiving, right? They magnify, you know, everything, your pores, your blemishes. But it's good sometimes to do that on a spiritual level, right? And so, but the outcome of that is that you're in a humbled state. Because once you're in a humbled state, then you start accepting that, you know what, I have a lot to work on, and now I'm ready to study these diseases in depth and to start having honest conversation with myself. What applies to me? Because, you know, some of these diseases you might not feel like you have. Others you might be like, oh my God, you know. And I'll share, like, there were a couple of diseases when we were in this class where it was shocking, because you never think, you know, you have something until it's actually, you know, really explained to you how it manifests. And then it's like, astaghfirullah, like, wow, I never, you know, no, we all have very good opinions of ourselves, right? So nobody wants to accept that they have a character flaw. And that's what this book is all about. It's about character flaws, right? So once it's actually explained to you and it's defined to you, and then you're reading it and you're like, oh my God, astaghfirullah. But again, if you start off with that state of total humility, that's a possibility, right? That you've been humbled to the state where, yeah, I'm actually going to read the rest of this text with the understanding that I could be afflicted with all 25, right? I'm not above this. You know, that's why I'm here, because I want to purify myself, but not to ever think like, oh, you know, that I'm good, I was raised with good values, I was raised with this, no, because these things are very subtle, and that's what we're gonna learn as we continue. All right, so, and then on the section where he talks about the purification process, that's pretty much what I just sort of addressed, right? Purifying the heart is a process. First, one must understand the necessity of having adab with Allah, which we talked about last week, and the importance of fulfilling its requirements as they have just been stated. Second, one must be aware of the diseases of the heart, aware of their existence, of their ailments, and of the deleterious complications and troubles that ensue from them, and recognize that these diseases prevent one from attaining this adab. Knowledge of the diseases of the heart, their causes, and how to remove them is an obligation on every sane adult human being. So again, reiterating that this is a fard ayn for every single person. Okay, and then we talked also about the different types of hearts last week, right? The different 8 hearts. One of them we talked about was the blackened heart, and on page 20, there's the hadith, or again, I'm sorry if the pages are off, but they're on the section after that section of purification. On the following page, there's the hadith the Prophet ﷺ stated that if the son of Adam sins, a black spot appears in the heart, and if the person repents, it is erased. But if he does not, it continues to grow until the whole heart becomes pitch black. So that's the the citation for that reference there. Okay. All right, Bismillah. So just a quick summary of that introduction. I hope you all read it. Now, we're going to go ahead and start, Bismillah, on the very first disease here, which is miserliness. So I'm going to read the poem, and then we're going to get into the actual text and the discussion, Bismillah. So verses 16 to 25 on miserliness. Now then, the refusal to give what is obliged according to sacred law or to virtuous merit is the essence of miserliness, which is mentioned among the diseases of the heart. As for the obligations of sacred law, they are such things as zakat, supporting one's dependents, and rights due to others, and relieving the distressed. Examples of virtuous merit include not nitpicking over trivialities. Avoiding this is even more important with respect to a neighbor, a relative, or a wealthy person, or when hosting guests or concerning something in which such behavior is inappropriate, such as purchasing a burial shroud or a sacrificial animal, or purchasing something you intend to donate to the needy. Thus, one who makes matters difficult for one whose rights clearly render this inappropriate to do so, such as a neighbor, has indeed torn away the veils of dignity. This is, as the majestic and guiding sages have stated, this is comparable to one who fulfills his obligations without good cheer, or who spends from the least of what he possesses. Its root is love of this world for its own sake, or so that the self can acquire some of its fleeting pleasures. So right away, the definition and causes of miserliness is Imam Al-Haddad provides here. He says, Imam Al-Haddad brings to the fore of the discussion of these diseases their etiology and how to cure them. So that's what we have in the beginning of those verses. The first disease, the first disease he speaks of is miserliness. It is first not because it is the worst of characters, but because of alphabetical ordering in Arabic. So bukhl, right, starts with a ba, so that's why he's listed it first. So just he's making that point that, it's not necessarily the root or the first, disease, it's just for that reason. And then he mentions 2 aspects. One relates to the sacred law Sharia, that is the rights due to God and his creation. The other pertains to muru'a, which is an important Arabic concept that connotates manliness and valor. In pre-Islamic Arab culture, valor was a defining concept. It is similar to Western ideals of chivalry and virtue. So in the first, definition of miserliness, we're looking at, how you are with the sacred law, with the obligations that are put on you. Are you a miser when it comes to fulfilling your rights, right? Giving what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks of you in terms of the zakat that we pay, the sadaqah that we pay, right? This is part of our tradition, that we are obliged to pay these things. So if you have a hard time giving to those things, this is a sign of bukhl. Like every time the season comes around to give zakat, it's a yearly thing that we offer. That it's you get constricted. It's hard for you. You're trying to look for loopholes on how to cut the amount that you give, or you don't give at all. And there are some people who actually do not fulfill this. This is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. We have to give, but there are some people who just completely don't give zakat, right? or if there's opportunities to help in charitable causes, that again, you feel this constriction. And it's usually because you have a lack of true understanding that whenever you give for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is your wealth being lessened, right? Is it being diminished? When we give for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to believe with firm yaqeen that it's never a deficit, right? So, when you're like doing your accounting, balancing checks in your checkbook, and you have to subtract, you don't do that when you give for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's actually the opposite. You're purifying the wealth that could be from, haram or whatever sources that are not, that you're not sure about, unsure sources. You're purifying that wealth, but it's also a means of actually increasing your wealth. But if you don't have that understanding, what happens is you become very constricted by the idea of giving. And so this is a sign of a miser, right? And there's many, actually let me just quickly pull up some other hadith that also discuss this. Well, in the Quran we have chapter 4, verse 37. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who are miserly and enjoin miserliness on other men and hide what Allah has bestowed upon them of His bounties, and we have prepared for them, for the disbelievers, a disgraceful torment. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is one of the most wretched qualities, to be a miser. It's really looked down upon, right? Because you're again denying the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as he mentioned in that first section, that the root cause of this is a hubb of dunya. You have this attachment to worldly possessions and wealth, and you don't want to separate from them, and that's why it's so hard to give, right? But it's just considered a really a terrible quality to have. And then there's a hadith where Asma reported that the Prophet ﷺ said, spend in charity and do not count it, lest Allah count it against you. Do not hoard it, lest Allah withhold from you. And this is why, we have that understanding that when you give, you should give, with your right hand in a way that your left hand doesn't even know what you're giving, right? So that's why when we say don't count it, like, sometimes they'll have, I'm sure we've all been in gatherings where it's like, okay, we're doing a quick, fundraising pitch or trying to raise money for so-and-so cause, and everybody's digging in their purses, right? And so if you see a dollar bill, the adab of giving without this issue, right, without this worry, is that you just pull and give. You're not sitting there going, let me calculate here, right? Do I need this for later? Am I gonna, you're just like, oh, there's a need, there's a call to action, I'm responding, and your heart is just like, tawakkal ala Allah. Whatever that amount was, I gave it for the sake of Allah, and Allah is well aware of my niyyah, and I just want to help the situation, and alhamdulillah. So you give without that burden of wanting to know specifically, what did I give, right? So that's the best way to give when you want to be free of this particular disease. Ibn Hajar said that the meaning is, I think it's related to this hadith, is do not store wealth in a vault and thus be miserly in giving charity, lest you are recompensed in the same way for that. So, don't look at your wealth like something that you need to hold on to, right? For whatever reason. Because the worst of people are those who are miser because they say, they benefit not in this world, right? Because they don't use their wealth, they're hoarding it. And then on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask them about their wealth. So it's like you're the ultimate loser. Because it's like you had opportunity to actually enjoy it in this world and you didn't. And now it's going to be a possible reason for you to be punished for it. So why put yourself in that position, right? And then this is also another really interesting point. The miserly, holds or clings to his wealth, right? The word for cling in Arabic is masak, okay? Which is derived from another Arabic word, which is, what, does anybody know? Constipation, okay? So just let that image, settle for a second. But miserly people are those who are unable to let go of something that is otherwise harmful to them. Right? The same way that someone who is constipated is not able to let go, right, of something that harms them. So think of that. If you are someone who has a hard time with letting go of your wealth, this is what you're likened to. It's not something that we should ever want to be associated with, right? And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, God has made what is excreted from the son of Adam a metaphor for the world. So think about that, the world, this is all it comes down to. It's all going to disappear. It's all going to go to waste at some point. So it's, it's likened to what we excrete, and that's why hoarding it and having so much value, for it is harmful, because you're holding on to, again, something that's going to benefit you not in this world, and like I said, perhaps, will harm you in the next. So those are, again, the qualities of bukhal. Let's look at the rest of the commentary here. Bismillah. So it goes on to talk about, valor, right, chivalry, and especially for those who do have wealth. This is, to be generous, to be magnanimous with your wealth is a noble quality. We should, for those of whoever has been blessed, with abundance, and most of us, if we're really being honest, we have been. If we compare our lifestyles with the way that people in the rest of the world live, we are absolutely in abundance, and we are considered in the top, wealthy, 0.00 whatever 1%. You could, I'm sure, calculate with respects to the rest of the world. We're considered amongst the elite, right? We have clean running water. We can choose our meals every day. We can, to that level, it's like if you have a craving, you can order it within minutes or maybe an hour. It's at your door. I don't know, we might not have servants who are running around for us, but in a way, isn't that the same, right? That it's so easy now to get whatever we want, whereas there's people all over the world who've never had, meat before, who've never tasted meat, because they don't have, the luxury of that, or their water, to have a, clear glass of water, it's like a new concept to them, because it's likely that their water is dark and God knows what's in it, right? So we have to appreciate that we are amongst the wealthy. And so what does that mean? What's the responsibility on us? It's that we have generosity, that we're magnanimous and we're generous, right? That we actually, we have that spirit of wanting to share our wealth, not, just keep it for ourselves, right? And so when we talk about bukhal, that's the other, part of it is, one is with respects to the sacred law and Sharia and what is expected, but also the other is with respects to the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How are you in terms of being generous with other people? This is another, you might fulfill your duties because you feel obligated, but then if you don't have that spirit of generosity to share your wealth with others and to, give gifts, for example, or welcome people to your home, this is a sign, right? And there are some people who just don't like to do those things. But on themselves, they'll spend, right? So it's for themselves and their family or people that they're going to somehow benefit. It's fine, but they don't have that same spirit with other people. So if you want to be free from this disease, this is what you want to look at. Like, how am I in terms of my, just way of being with other people? If you go out to a restaurant and let's say you have the means, and that there are people who are in the gathering who don't have the means. Are you the one who offers and says, I got you, I got the bill, don't worry about it, or I'll pay for your portion of it? Or do you just sit there and, you know what I mean? So think about that next time you're in those, opportunities where you can show generosity. What is it that holds you back? What's that voice in your head that says don't? And we're talking about if you have the means. Obviously, if you don't have the means, it's different, right? But that's just something to, again, listen to that internal voice of yours. What is it that speaks to you? Are you worried about what, that you're losing? Because, again, whenever you're giving for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if you're doing something like that, even as a generous act for someone else, it's you can do it for the sake of Allah. Like, I'm trying to help someone out who I know is potentially, maybe they're out of work, maybe they don't have a job right now, they lost their job, they laid off, or that they have student debts or debts, whatever it is, they just recently got married, and that's stressful. A lot of young couples are in debt already when they start their new lives together, because marriage is such a big expense, having a big wedding. And not that, I certainly don't advocate that, but unfortunately in many of our cultures that's just the status quo. That's what you do, right? You have to have these big productions, and so what that does is it sets you off, right, for a life of hardship. You're playing catch up. And so if you know that you're out again with someone in a financial circumstance is difficult, then just, what's your response to that, right? That's how you listen to your voice. And also if someone owes you a debt, right, and that's addressed also in this section, how do you treat that person, right? If you, are owed money by someone and you know that it's difficult for them to pay you back, are you the type that forgives the debt and says, don't worry about it, that $500 that, I lent you a year or 2 years ago, just don't sweat it. Because for you, $500 isn't a big deal, right? Maybe you have, alhamdulillah, much more than that in your bank account. So do you have that generous spirit, or are you the one who's, every single time you see a person who owes you a money, that's the first thought that comes to your mind? Oh, they never paid me back, And you see this, I've heard people say this before about people who owe them money, right? It's like, oh, she owes me this amount, but she can go on vacation, but she's got that, Louis Vuitton bag, or she's, out at this fancy place. And people get really resentful, because it's like, well, why isn't she paying me back? Or why isn't he paying me my debt, right? But again, if you don't have a need for that specific amount of money, wouldn't it be better for you to just call that person up and say, listen, don't worry about it. It's just a gift. Accept that from me to you, And imagine the reward that you get from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiving that debt, and not putting people under pressure. So that's the other quality of someone who's free from this disease, is that they're easy and gentle on people who owe them money, right? That you're not someone who's just so, again, obsessed with wealth and money that it's always at the tip of your tongue and you can't wait to mention these things to people. You don't do that if you're, again, someone free from this disease. So, and it's, if you look at, again, on the very last, I think, paragraph, before he gets into the treatment, where it says Imam Ali said that the worst person is the miser. In this world, he is deprived of his own wealth, and in the hereafter, he's punished, right? So that's what we were saying earlier. So think about that. May Allah free us from this terrible disease. So what's the remedy, right? How do you free yourself from this disease? The treatment, again, it was mentioned here in the poem, so let's read those verses. Treat this by realizing that those who achieved affluence did so only by exhausting themselves over long periods of time, thus finally accumulating what they sought. Meanwhile, just as they approach the heights of earthly splendor, death suddenly assails them. Treat miserliness by also recognizing the disdain shown to misers and the hatred people have for them, even hatred amongst misers themselves. With this same treatment, treat the person whose heart's ailment is love of wealth. So we'll get to love of wealth soon, but it's the similar treatment, which is realizing that wealth, for most people isn't, a birthright. They weren't necessarily, born into affluence. A lot of people do work really hard. So sometimes, there's this sort of an envy tied to miserliness, right? Like you're looking at other people who are wealthy and just looking at their lifestyles, and you want that for yourself. So that's why this need to hold on to your wealth, comes into play, because you want to have what they have. They have the nice house, they have the big car, the nice car, they get to go in, globe-trotting all over the world. So there's all this, envy that builds up in your heart, which makes you think like, well, I want that too. If they get it, I want it, right? But a lot of people who are wealthy, they worked hard to get that, but also they suffer. There's, look at around us, look at our society, celebrities, for example. I mean, if we're really being honest, they may, show their lives as being amazing and fabulous and everything's going, perfectly for them. But a lot of them have serious problems, right? Serious mental health issues. A lot of them are, they're either, on some form of medication, or they're self-medicating with other, things like alcohol and God knows what else, other vices, But this is all because there's, wealth comes with a lot of tribulation. And that's why if you know people who are really wealthy, they'll tell you it's a tribulation to have a lot of wealth. So not to, I guess, just focus on the benefits of using, of wealth and having wealth, and that's where you want to, hold on to your wealth, but actually realizing it comes with a price, that's one of the treatments. And then the other treatments is, again, remembering that death can assail at any time, any of us. So what's the point of, again, hoarding wealth, when not enjoying wealth, and then, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes you, and now, you've you know what I mean? Like, you didn't enjoy it, and as we mentioned, you have to pay for it in the next life by being asked about it. So reflect on those things. And then the third one is to realize that miserliness is such a terrible quality that most people can't stand the miser. Even amongst other people, they have a disdain for one another. So, really trying to distance yourself as much as possible from those behaviors. And then proactively, we want to watch our response to moments of giving and charity. And pay attention to your thoughts. Pay attention to what it is that comes to your mind when you're in an opportunity to give. What's the first thought you have? Okay? And also get in the practice of not counting your wealth. So when you're in those moments to give, reach for what you have. And what I would actually do, and I know people who do this, mashallah, it's actually a beautiful quality, is they'll have either money or something that they've prepared in advance. Like, let's say in your car, if you're going to go down an area where there's a lot of homeless, right? And they sometimes might come up to you or put you on the spot. But if you are prepared, then what you do is you have little baggies, or something that's already like portioned out. And you give with honor, by the way. When we give to anybody in need, we don't give as a way of like, oh, I'm better than you, here you go. You don't want to make it this exchange that makes them feel low and bad, because in actuality, every time we give to people, they're the ones who are honoring us with the opportunity to show our generosity and to gain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we should look to them with that eye, not the eye of I'm above you, right? And here's my charity to you because you're below me. So try to honor the people who come to you. If Allah crosses paths, with you and someone, honor them in a way. If you have an opportunity to give them a meal, for example, I did this once, and alhamdulillah, I'm just sharing as an example, but I remember she just felt so like shocked, that I would even do this. And I wrote about this on Facebook a few years back when it happened, but I had met her. She came to me in the mall. I was in the mall with my kids at a store. They were playing, and this lady who had a shopping cart, and she was visibly homeless, you could tell. She tapped me on the shoulder. She saw me in my hijab, and she's like, "Assalamu alaikum." And then, we started talking, and she apparently, Allah knows her, whether or not everything she was telling me was true, but I believed her, that she had at one point actually been very accomplished and very successful. She was going on to tell me about her life. She was in the tech world, and she traveled the world. That's why she knew some Arabic words. She'd been around Muslims before, and she was like, I love Muslim people, they're so amazing. But she was in a car accident and, fell on hard times, lost a lot of her wealth. But she said, she lived a very good lifestyle for a long time. And so we got to talking, and then I invited her to lunch, at the food court. It was what was available at that time. But she kind of was like, at first, shocked that I even am talking to her for as long as I did, because she did, she had a smell, and I'm just being honest here, it was very, you could definitely smell, So she said to me that most people are repulsed by her and they ignore her, and she actually, when she comes in the mall, she's usually chased out because of the smell and her presentation and the cart and the whole scene. So I told her not to worry about that. I said, inshallah, not inshallah, but I said, no, don't worry. I won't let you get kicked out. Let's just go together and eat. And so we sat together and we ate, and she just was really like shocked, you know. But that's why did I do that? It's because this is what our deen teaches us, right? That you honor people wherever level they're at and try to make them feel human. And unfortunately, we've gotten to a place in our world and in our society where we really look down on people who are, who are in these situations. And so we don't give with honor. But when you give, you want to give with honor. So I have friends who, mashallah, I'm so amazed by them, because they'll have like little kits prepared, for like the homeless, that have everything that they would need, toiletries, toothbrush, just things that they might not have easy access to, but they prepare it beautifully, it's really done nicely, so that when they receive it, it's like, to them, that's like, wow, what a nice gesture, nobody ever treats us this way. So you can do that, if you really want to work on, if you feel like this is something that afflicts you or that you have an issue with, try to think of creative ways like that to take care of this, so that it doesn't, because again, you just don't want to feed into this. You see people with age becoming more and more, right? They hoard their wealth even more and more, right? Because it's a disease. That's why you have shows like Hoarders. I don't know if you guys have seen those shows, right? Those are really hard to watch because you see, astaghfirullah, the effects of someone who doesn't have any control of this at all. Like, they're just given in completely to the point where they're accumulating wealth that is obstructing their life, from the ceiling, floor to the ceiling, they have goods that they'll never use. But that's what it all comes from. It's like this one desire to just keep getting and getting and getting. So may Allah protect us from all of that. But that's those are the treatments of that particular disease, inshallah. Okay, any questions related to miserliness that we can address? Yes, bismillah. Walaikum salam.
So you said that we shouldn't take into account what we're giving.
Mm-hmm.
But we live in a very expensive society, so we have to account for almost everything.
Yes.
It's an unfortunate dichotomy.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're going to give, should you at least be selective?
Very good question. Alhamdulillah. The brother asked, for those who are, again, we're recording this for students elsewhere who are not able to attend. So the brother asked, if you're going to give, should you be selective? And of course, you have the prerogative. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you wealth, and you have the prerogative to give to whichever or whoever you choose to give to. And so you can, use your own discernment. If you have, a particular organization or group, or maybe, ideally you want to look at, sort of like your circles, right? What's your inner circle would be your family and friends. Is there anybody within my family, the people closest to me that are in need? And then you go beyond that. You look into your community, and then beyond that. And so you can absolutely do that, and have a sort of list, of what causes or relief causes speak to you. For me, for example, orphans are, they have my heart. So if there's anything that has to do with orphans, I love, for example, Give Light Foundation, which is another wonderful organization that originated here in the Bay Area. If you don't know about them, look them up. But they're amazing. They do incredible work. They go around the world, and they create orphanages that are beautiful. They're not just, buildings that are cold and removed. They really put a lot of effort into creating homes and giving these orphans an experience of being loved and in an environment where they feel that their lives are being enriched, every day by teachers and by people, caretakers who take care of them. But look up their work; they're amazing. And again, they're based here in the South Bay. So that for me is what speaks to me. Someone else might say, I give to disaster relief, or war-torn countries, or and so you can absolutely, yeah. I hope that answers your question. Jazakallah khair. Alhamdulillah. Oh, this is called Give Light Foundation. Yes, Give Light, it's one word. And Diane Alian, she's a very dear friend of mine. She is the founder. Her story is amazing. She has YouTube videos where she actually tells, she's another incredible story, because she worked for Procter & Gamble for several years, very successful in her, in the corporate world. She left all of that to now serve thousands of orphans worldwide. So look up her work, mashallah, very, very inspiring. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so then, I think on this list, bukhul is here, it should be. For those of you who don't have, we have a list, a handout that I have here. You're more than welcome to come pick it up. But, oh yeah, is it the first one? Oh, there it is. Okay, stinginess. Sorry, I was looking for miserliness. So, synonym. Stinginess, yes, it's right there. Okay, so you can, again, please take a copy if you need it, and then use this if you want to just make little notes here and there on the side about, whatever speaks to you in this discussion, inshallah. All right, I think we can move on to wantonness, the next one. So wantonness, and this is verses 30-31. Okay. As for the disease of wantonness, its definition is excessive mirth, which, according to the people of knowledge, is having excessive exuberance. Treat it with hunger and the remembrance of the hereafter, reminding yourself that God says He does not love the excessively joyful, which alone is a deterrent. Okay, the next disease, the definition and treatment. The next disease is wantonness, batar, along with excessiveness, an unbridled desire to need and want more. The word batar has several meanings: the inability to bear blessings, bewilderment, dislike of something undeserving of dislike, and reckless extravagance. Imam Maulud says that according to the people of knowledge, it is defined as excessive mirth and exuberance. He then says that its cure is intentionally engaging in hunger and reflecting on death. So this disease is, pretty self-explanatory, but having this, this desire for excessiveness, right? And we just talked about that. We see it all around us, right? People just wanting to accumulate more and more, living beyond your means, right? Would be an example of wantonness, and this is absolutely part of our society. People are in debt. Their attachment to worldly things is so great that they're willing to put themselves in financial peril for it, right? And so a sign of, again, having no restraint when it comes to these things, spending on things excessively, spending on things that are, maybe not of great value, but because you want a status, there's status that comes with having that thing, is also an example of wantonness, right? At the bottom it says, wantonness is a disease to which the world's affluent societies are particularly vulnerable. Again, we're one of the top wealthiest nations in the world, right? China being ahead of us. I'm not sure if anybody else is, but I think we're the top two. In societies that are extremely pleased with their standard of living, their extravagance and hubris are obvious. One sign of these conditions is the ease with which people enter into debt and living contentedly with it. People are consciously living beyond their means in order to maintain the appearance of affluence. This is a product of wantonness, willingly falling headlong into debt in order to achieve a certain material standard of living, right? And how many people do we know who do that, right? And not only do they, harm themselves, right, by falling into debt, racking up, credit card after credit card, but they'll actually borrow money from other people in order to maintain a certain lifestyle. I have this investment or have this, and it's all because they're really so attached to the idea of being wealthy that they'll do anything to get there, even if it means putting someone else in a hardship, right? So just to see the effects that it can harm more than just the person themselves. So the treatment the Imam offers here is to, willingly, intentionally feel the effects of not having. I mean, if you want so much and you want at all costs, then try to not have, right? Deprive yourself, deprivation. So fasting is one of the ways that we deprive ourselves. When we fast, we are, everything's accessible to us, but we're forcefully putting ourselves in a situation of not, right, giving in to that desire for the reasons that we know, right? When we fast, whether it's during Ramadan or outside of Ramadan, the intention is to put ourselves in that state of deep reflection about all of the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, to remember, just how how people all over the world who don't have live, right? Because it's very easy when you're in societies like we are to get, kind of deluded, about the way people live in the rest of the world. As I mentioned in the beginning, we live in such abundance that if you've traveled the world, you know what I'm talking about, right? People just do not have the level of convenience and ease that we have. My husband and I were recently watching a show, I can't remember what it was, but it had, images of a country in South America, and I just remember going, astaghfirullah, like, we're so ungrateful for what we have, the ease with which we live, and just civil obedience, the fact that we don't have to worry about things, happening when we step outside of our homes, or, we can travel safely, we have to be really grateful for that. But most people don't live that way. So what you do when you fast is you have those moments of reflection, because it actually, you feel starvation, you feel the effects of hunger. And that reminds you, like, oh my God, imagine if I didn't have food, every day, or at a certain hour, I didn't have, the opportunity to indulge in whatever I wanted, which we usually do, right? We'll go hours and hours with nothing, but then we're very specific about the exact thing that we want when we can have it, right? The menu has been, we have the menu in place, or the restaurant's been called, the food's been delivered, or whatever's been made, but we get our cravings, on when it's time. Well, most people don't have that luxury, right? So when you have this disease of the heart, to forcefully deprive yourself to do that is actually, inshallah, going to help your spiritual state. And the second aspect to the remedy is to remember death and the hereafter. So you'll find, this is just the first class, class where we're looking into the diseases, but as we proceed through the book, the remembrance of death is actually a treatment for many of these diseases. And keep that in mind, because how often do we really reflect on death, right? Again, this is another part of another byproduct of living in a really affluent society, is that death is hidden from us, right? We don't really even see, one of the things I noticed is in other societies, the elderly are very much a part of the fabric of that society. You'll see a lot of elderly walking around, or they'll just be, in public places, in squares, or in shopping areas, or wherever, markets. You'll see a lot of elderly people. I'm always amazed when I travel at that. We went to Turkey earlier last year, and I loved it. That was probably one of my favorite things about going to Turkey. I was like, oh my God, there's so many elderly everywhere. They were just, chilling and hanging out, and you saw, their little grandkids or other people just, around them. But it was really beautiful to be immersed in a society that actually brings the elderly out in public spaces. Whereas here, you notice, we don't have that. What do? We tuck away the elderly in nursing homes, right? Or in elderly communities. Like here in the Bay Area, do you guys know about Rossmore? Right? Do you know where Rossmore is? It's not that far from here. It's by Walnut Creek. Rossmore is an entire, city for elderly. It's like they're hidden in their own little city. And if you go to Rossmore, you'll feel it. They drive very slow in Rossmore, so be careful. Do not drive fast. You don't want to spook them. I know Rossmore very well. I used to work for someone at Merrill Lynch, and we used to do, financial seminars and workshops. And his demographic of choice was the elderly in Rossmore, because they'd come out. They actually would come out Sunday morning, 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning for a continental breakfast and listen to a 2-hour-long speech on stocks and bonds, but we used to call them, and they were so sweet, and they were so thankful, someone's actually calling them. Most people, I used to call to invite them, and most people, as soon as they see a number they don't recognize, click. Not the elderly, because they're lonely, right? Many of them, astaghfirullah, they have, a lot of them are mentally, they're declining because of loneliness. That's how sad our situation is, and not just here, but there's many articles you can read about, the UK have a real problem with this. A lot of elderly are dying from sadness. That's their actual death reason, because nobody calls them, nobody takes care of them, because we've done such a good job of shunning them and hiding them. Why? Because we don't want to face mortality, right? When you're, when you're living in a society that glorifies and romanticizes youth and everything youthful is praised, then the opposite of that is true, right? Anything that reminds you of aging and death is not welcome. So that's what we've done here. And I know it's unfortunate, but in our tradition, the answer or the treatment for so many of these really serious problems that we have in our world, like everyday life, is the remembrance of death. So it's the complete opposite message. It's saying don't forget death, because if you're afflicted with these diseases or problems in your life, just remembering your mortality should reset you, right? Should recalibrate you to remember to treat your family members well, to remember to pick up the phone and call so-and-so, or to pay that debt back, or to fulfill an obligation or a right. So the remembrance of death is huge, and it's not a morbid thing, when I was I'm just remembering now, when I was in college, I used to, be the president of the MSA, so I would do different activities with our, the club, and one of the activities I did was to have everybody come to a graveyard at night, and we went actually to a graveyard in Oakland. I wish I knew which one it was, but a lot of the people were spooked because they'd never even set foot in a graveyard before, and now I'm asking them to come to the graveyard like at night after hours when it's kind of a quiet, spooky place. But the purpose of that was like, let's talk about death. Let's actually go through the rites of death. What are what happens after death? And you'll find no other tradition has as much information on death as Islam. Like the level of information we have about the death process is incredible, right? We know, like, as soon as the soul is taken, what happens, and the questioning in the grave. Just there's so much depth and detail to that, and all of that is good for us to know. We should look into it. And again, not like I have people that are anytime you mention death, they're just like, oh, shudder, because it's like scary for them. But death is, we're only afraid of what we don't know, right? That's just fear in general. Most of our fears are what we're unfamiliar with. But if you actually become familiar with death and you realize that yes, it is something that we should seek protection from and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us a good ending and all of that. We shouldn't be like, everything's going to be perfect. We don't have that guarantee, but that's where those laws come into place. But once you, again, read to the level of detail that we have and familiarize yourself with the process of even washing a body. How many here, for example, have ever washed a body before? Good, mashallah, assalamu alaikum. Very good. It's encouraged to wash a body. You shouldn't run from those opportunities if you're ever put in a situation where someone asks you, whether it's a family member or even a stranger. I've washed two complete strangers. One was a murder victim, and one was a convert who had no family members. Never met them in my life, but alhamdulillah, the opportunity came, and I was like, okay, let's do this. It's a, fard kifaya. They don't have anybody to wash them. You can't just turn away. But if those opportunities come, don't put your discomfort before the right that you could give this person, because you will, and I'll say this sincerely, you will benefit from that experience. It is hard on the stomach, like if you have that weak sort of, it's hard spiritually to do, because it's such a clear reminder of what's going to happen to you, and you have all these thoughts will come to you. But I guarantee you, when you leave that experience, and maybe in the days and weeks after to reflect on the experience, it will make you a better person. It'll make you connected more with your Lord. It'll make you appreciate the people in your life more. You'll look at everybody, not just the elderly, because that's the other problem we have when we think of death. We think it only affects people who are kind of on their way out, but that's not the case. And that's why the remembrance of death is so important, because it can assail any one of us in any moment. I don't know if you saw that video that was circulating last week. Did you see of that Shaykh who's giving the khutbah, yeah? How many people saw that? He's giving a talk, right? And in the middle of the talk, he literally says, La ilaha illallah. Those are his last words. And he just, khalas, in the middle of a khutbah. So we should know that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, it can come at any time. But the frequent remembrance of death keeps you in check so that you watch yourself, so that you watch the tone of voice with which you talk to people, like, is there arrogance in there? Is there rudeness in the way that I spoke to them? Did I take the rights of anybody? It constantly puts you in that state of self, accountability. And that's why it's so important. But remembrance of death, as I said, is not just for certain groups, it's for all of us. So you should also, for me, for example, and I just thinking about this yesterday, in the Quran, actually, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I can't remember the exact verse, forgive me, but I'll try to remember for next session. It's a verse that says, if we plan to do anything, what should we say? What's the word that we should use? Inshallah, right? This is a verse in the Quran. Jazakallah khair. Can you say it, please, the verse? MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair. Yes, this is the verse. Thank you so much. Do you know the actual reference of that? Okay, MashaAllah. And verse? Oh, it's okay. Inshallah. Thank you. So it's Surah Al-Kahf. Very good. Thank you. So that verse, right, if you have anything to say, and this is related to the story of Musa and Khidr, right, that if you have anything to say, do in the morrow or tomorrow, say inshallah. We should all be in the practice of this. Never, ever let a moment, or a plan go without mentioning this. And I get, I'm a stickler for this, especially with my family. Like, if they go, I'll see you, okay, all right, take care, peace out, I'll see you, say inshallah, Or like when my husband travels and he'll, say all this stuff and he'll go, don't worry, everything will be fine, I'll be back soon. And he'll say all this and I'm waiting, and then I'll go, say inshallah. So it's like you have to be on it because, again, we don't know what's going to happen, right? When that moment is going to come. But part of that remembrance is to look at your family every single time they come home securely and safely, and everybody's tucked in. You have to be in an absolute state of gratitude. Alhamdulillah, thank you, Allah. And I know it sounds like, okay, well, I don't want to catastrophize, every moment, but to have that level of awareness that death is so imminent, always, that every night they come home, every day they go out, even if it's for a quick errand, go grab, I'm going to go grab a pizza, or I'm going to go, to the bank real quick, I'm going to go fill up the gas. If they make it home safely, even if it's 10, 15 minutes they were gone, you should be in a state of alhamdulillah. Because again, that's how, how many people do we know where they didn't come home, right? I mean, I know personally people, right, their spouses went for a bike ride, for example, or a quick jog, or went to the gym. Young people, we're not talking 80, 70-year-old people who have, heart conditions or diseases. We're talking about young people who went to the gym and they just fell flat after working out, So death is like that. But that's what we're talking about when we're talking about remembrance of death, right? Not just as a subject, like, death, but actually getting to that level of real depth where you're connecting the people in your life, your own self, obviously, If you died right now, or before we left, this gathering, would you be proud? Would you be happy with your state with Allah? With the way that you are with your family? Have you wronged anybody that you wish you could, correct? That's the level of awareness you want to have when you're thinking about death, and keeping that always in the back of your mind. And that's part of our daily dhikr. We should constantly be thinking about this. This is prophetic. The Prophet ﷺ told us, remember death, right? So those are the remedies for this particular disease. And that's why that whole section at the end really speaks to that, right? It says, the second aspect of the remedy is to remember death and the hereafter. What is meant by remember here is not the common function of memory, in which one merely calls up a fact without reflection. In fact, no remedy mentioned in this book involves a flaccid process. Each requires exertion and a true desire to achieve success in its fullest sense. Freeing the heart of diseases like wantonness requires the remembrance of the hereafter and its various states and tumultuous scenes. For example, one should reflect on the state of the grave, right? Which will be either a parcel of paradise or a pit of hell. May Allah, protect us from the darkness of the grave and the constriction of the grave and expand our graves for us. But really making, again, an intentional reflection on that and asking for that. Once a person dies, his journey in the hereafter begins, right? So meditating not only on the process of death and death itself, but also on the hereafter. Thinking about, and this is why it's very important to familiarize ourselves with what all of that is. And there's so much content, so much hadith, so many books that have been written on. One of the books that I really recommend, I don't think I have it with me, but The Lives of Man. How many of you have that book? Very good. It's a really good book, right? It goes into the journey, the 5 different journeys of the soul. The soul, is on this journey from the beginning of creation, right? That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us in the primordial realm, and we had that, exchange where He asked us, "Am I not your Lord?" Right? Alastu bi rabbakum, and then we all answered bala, right? We all confirmed. That's the beginning of the journey, right? Of the soul, and then the womb, and then this world, and then the barzakh, and then the akhirah, the day of judgment, and then the eternal life. So it goes in through all of those stages in depth and helps you to really visualize. I mentioned last week, try to get to the level of reflection where you can visualize the scenes, in your mind, and some authors and people who, or speakers can go into great depth, in terms of description, and they really can help you do that. But not to turn away from topics that are like, death, because that's what, unfortunately, again, the society does. It just makes it so, I don't want to talk about things that bring me down. It's too depressing. It's too dark. Well, if the byproduct of studying that or focusing on that is that you become a better human being, is it really that bad, right? That you become a better person and that you appreciate your time? Isn't that a good thing, right? So it's not like we're asking you to study it for like hours on end, but just enough to where it keeps you mindful. Alhamdulillah. Let me just see actually in my notes here for other verses and hadith that I had related to this. Yes? Yes. Yes. Thank you. Jazakallah khairan. Very good. So Surah 18, 23, and 24 is the ayah that talks about the importance of getting in that habit of always saying, inshallah, when you're making any plans. Not just for, the future, the distant future, but today even. You have something to do later today, inshallah. And even on text messages, please get in the habit of that. Okay? And if you need to shortcut, IA, okay? I do IA sometimes. But we know what we're saying, right? So wantonness, let's see here, I'm seeing that. Okay, Bismillah. So it's the same content here that we just went over, so I won't repeat that, inshallah. Okay, so next we have hatred. Bismillah. Let's go ahead and get to the... I'm sorry, any questions on this section? Okay. Let's go ahead to hatred. Bismillah. Okay, sorry, before we go on, I was just reading that, I had some notes here. So that last section, right, on wantonness, it talks about, again, just, how wantonness is all over. So, don't feel too guilty if you have, certain qualities of this, because it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere, it's all around us. We're kind of bombarded with images that make us inclined towards these things. So don't be too hard on yourselves. But at the very last point it says, all those smiling people on these billboards, right? Because you see advertising and billboards and commercials and everything that constantly, glorify a certain lifestyle. that makes you might yearn for those things. Well, all of those people on those billboards who will someday die and stand before their Maker, this is the ultimate destiny of all human beings. This realization is the slayer of wantonness. So I really like that last line. So if you want to, again, get rid of this longing for material wealth, this longing for even the previous disease, right? Miserliness, just reflect on the fact that it's all going to go away. Next is hatred. Okay, so let's read the verses from the poem. Another disease is hatred for other than the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Its cure is to pray for the one despised. This is with the understanding that you have not done wrong if you are repulsed by the hatred you harbor and do not act in accordance with it to harm the person. So, you might have a relationship that's really difficult, and you just don't like a person, and that's okay to not like people. Okay, it's actually one of the first, one lesson that I learned that I really appreciated, because I think sometimes we have this idea that to be a good Muslim, you have to like everybody, right? And if you have problems with someone, that means you're a bad person. But this is not true. Some people gel and some people don't. Some people get along really well, and some people, no matter how hard you try, there's just, there's something blocking, right? The hearts. But hatred is, again, when you have no real reason to have that feeling. It's just maybe, and it can be very superficial. There are people who can be very superficial. And I've heard comments like this: oh, I can't stand her voice. I hate her. Astaghfirullah. Like, how can you say that about someone's, voice? I mean, that's something that they were given from Allah, right? But people can get so silly and superficial, and they give in to these really, it's not a good, quality to have, to use that word hatred. Like in my house, I tell my kids, they're not allowed to say they hate anything. It's like Iblis, Iblis, okay, you can hate Iblis. But even like someone like Donald Trump, like as much as we have so much contempt for him, for all of his policies, to have hatred for someone like that is not a good sign in your heart, because he's still alive, right? There's still hope. I know it might seem really, really, there's a long shot there, but, Allah is capable of anything, right? We don't know. And so to have hatred for a living human being for a reason other than the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which again, like I said, to hate someone who's alive, I mean, you're cutting them off from, from what? Like you can't say where their end is. You have no idea, right? So you want to always keep, you can have hatred for their policies, for their actions, for their words, but as a person, right, to condemn them already to hell, and we shouldn't do that. But there are people who are very quick to give in to those feelings, those really negative, toxic feelings, and it's because they just, maybe that's normal in their world, like everybody kind of talks like that, and they've never been, hey, that's, it's actually wrong to say that about someone. So they've just, gotten into that bad habit, or they really have some deep work to do on themselves, because to go around bitter and angry at everybody is just not a good reflection. So hatred, for other than the sake of Allah. But again, the consolation here is that second verse, that you're not held accountable if you aren't, if you're unhappy with those feelings, like it bothers you, right? It's not blameworthy if you're feeling guilty about having those feelings, and you definitely don't act on that. When it's blameworthy is that you're fine with it. You're like, whatever, I can't stand that person. Oh well, that's a blameworthy quality. Or even worse is that you actually act on your hatred, and you're now vindictive, and you're, just really poisonous as a person, and you want to harm that person. This is a level that's completely forbidden. But as long as it bothers you that you have negative feelings towards someone and you dislike their presence or just don't like them, then inshallah, there's hope, to work on that. Did you have a question? Yes?
I think a lot of hatred does come from jealousy.
Mm-hmm.
Why does this person have what I want?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, for the recording, I'm just going to repeat. So the sister said that a lot of hatred comes from jealousy, and that's absolutely true. And there is a connection, to some of the other diseases of the heart with this particular one. So let's go ahead and read this section, the definition and treatment. The next disease is hatred. Bughd. In itself, hatred is not necessarily negative, right? It is commendable to hate corruption, evil, disbelief, murder, lewdness, and anything else that God has exposed as despicable. The Prophet ﷺ never disliked things because of their essences, but because of what they manifested. So to have the ability to hate is not the issue here, because there are absolutely things that, that's what, is the appropriate response. They warrant hatred, right? All of the things mentioned here, oppression, abuse, all of those things we should hate. And that's what we mean when we say hatred for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates, we should hate. And that is actually a sign of iman, that you are always, aligning your heart with that which pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ, and that which displeases them, you have the same, right? Your hearts are aligned. So it's a sign of your iman. A hatred or strong dislike of a person for no legitimate reason is the disease of bughd. Again, legitimate is what? Unless they're doing something that we just mentioned that's really despicable and reprehensible, you can't just hate people because they exist in a way that you don't like, or they have a quality that you don't like, or they have a look that you don't like. Some people hate people because of the way they look. I mean, we know that because there's racists, but I mean, like, beyond, some ideological reason to hate them, we're talking just totally superficial reasons. I don't like their nose, or I don't like their eyes, or, or whatever. Their teeth. It's like stuff for Allah. So we're getting to the level where people give in to these feelings on such petty issues that there's absolutely no justification for that. And that's a disease of the heart. So when you can, make those statements easily, then you have definitely a problem here. And then this beautiful hadith here, the second paragraph, is really something for all of us to reflect on. Because sometimes, when we think of really spiritually elevated people or people who are the closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we might assume that these are people with a lot of knowledge, or they've done, a lot of, great, in terms of their ibadah, they're just, really, really, advanced, in terms of how much they've done. Maybe they've done 30 hajjs, or, they've memorized the Quran. So we kind of have all these ideas about what it means to be considered from the awliya, or considered, close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this hadith kind of settles that for us, because let's read it together, right? The Prophet ﷺ once said to his companions, "Do you want to see a man of paradise?" A man then passed by, and the Prophet ﷺ said, "That man is one of the people of paradise." So one of the companions who was with them, right, he decided that he wanted to know what was so special, right, about this particular man, that the Prophet ﷺ would actually say he's going to Jannah, like khalas, he's done, right, he's already set. And so he went and he spent as much time with the man as possible and observed him, but he noticed that he really didn't do much. He performed the tahajjud prayers, right? Or he did not, did not perform the tahajjud prayers or anything extraordinary. So he was just doing kind of like average deeds, nothing necessarily special, right? And so finally he told the man what the Prophet had said about him, right? He said, this is what the Prophet said, that you're going to Jannah. What is it that you're doing? Because I've observed you. It doesn't seem like you're doing anything special. And the man said, what? The only thing that I can think of, other than what everybody else does, is that I make sure that I never sleep with any rancor in my heart towards another, right? And rancor is that deep hatred, right? It's like a real... It's just, again, hatred for no reason. So that's it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave this man Jannah because he cleansed his heart every night from this feeling of hatred and this feeling of rancor. Okay, alhamdulillah. So that's a really powerful story that I think highlights what we're talking about. Yes? Right.
How do you handle that kind of a situation when someone hates you and you're not doing anything, but
right.
you're kind of involved in it?
I wish I had the exact quote, but there is a hadith that speaks to that. And I'll just kind of paraphrase. It says, be a person of your own mind. Don't do such and such because so-and-so does that to you, right? Like, have your own, you know what I mean? Be independent. Like, don't reciprocate on negative things like that. Like, oh, they're going to talk to me this way. They're going to be like this to me. Well, I'm going to give it right back to them. That is not a prophetic response. What you do is, again, if they have those feelings towards you and you haven't done anything necessarily to warrant them, you know, I mean, every situation is different, so like subjectively we could get to the details of like what's going on, but I think having some sort of an attempt of dialogue and reconciliation would be helpful. But if they're just going to reject you entirely, I would just say leave that, because you've already attempted it, but at least you can privately make dua for them, right? And ask, you know, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides their heart, but leave that door open in case they ever do find, you know, maybe the light and they want to come back and reconcile with you. But you've done your part in terms of wanting to reconcile, right? And you know, extending your hand out and, you know, or the olive branch out. But you don't have to humiliate yourself beyond that. Like, you don't have to keep, you know, knocking down their door and, you know, subjecting yourself to their abuses if they've already kind of rejected you, you know? Yeah, so I hope that's clear. Yes? In a sense, well, sure, if it's, I mean, they can be tied together, right? If you have a reason to resent someone, that will likely lead to you hating them, right? If they've done something to you and you don't resolve those emotions, the resentment's kind of like, I think, the seed, and then eventually it sprouts into full-blown, right, hatred. So I would say it's definitely something that you should pay attention to, and never let those feelings settle. You know, like I'm, you know, maybe because, you know, I do mediation and I see it all the time, but I just feel like it's not worth it to let those feelings settle in your heart. If someone's done something wrong to you and you feel really hurt and afflicted and it's bothering you to the point that it disrupts your spiritual growth, tend to it, you know, look at it like this cancer that if you don't excise it and treat it, it's only going to grow and affect you. Right? Because that person likely is carried on, moved on, and maybe has no idea what's going on, right? And this is why studying the temperaments is really important, right? The 4 temperaments, I think I referred to it last week, but studying the 4 temperaments helps because what it does is it explains human personality and kind of gives us a framework to understand that people are at different levels, and so whether you're doing conflict resolution or any, you know, communication, that you have to learn how to communicate with people on their level. Because for some people, they may be oblivious completely to, like I said, the fact that they've done something to hurt you, harm you, or, you know, cause you to be resentful, and there was no intention whatsoever, right? They're just, you know, some people are careless. They might say something like, you know, just in the moment and not realizing that that really hurt you or offended you. And if your temperament is the type that is not reactive, right? Like if you study the 4 temperaments, there's one temperament, the melancholic, who can harbor real deep resentment for years and never ever address those feelings. How toxic is it for that person, right? That you're sitting with this really bad feeling towards someone because you know, your temperament is non-reactive, you're non-confrontational, you don't want to. But this is where, again, when you study the temperaments, it's not just to define the different personality types and say you are what you are, that's it. No, it's to say this is perhaps what your temperament is, but the prophetic response is this: match it, right? Fight against the grain, go against your, you know, whatever is comfortable for you, your nature. Get yourself to be parallel with the prophetic example, right? So I would say to anybody who's holding on to resentment for a really long time towards someone, if the reason why you haven't resolved it is because you're the obstacle that stands in your own way, you don't want to talk about it, you don't want to confront them, you just rather X them out of your life, then just think about the negative effects that has on your heart, right? That you're the one sitting, stewing, and still angry, and maybe if that person's name is ever mentioned in your presence, you roll your eyes with disgust, and you might even make ghiba about them. So it's like, why let all of those, you know, negative consequences happen when all that it would take is probably a simple phone call, like, or can we meet for coffee? Can you come over? I'd like to talk to you. And your intention obviously has to be pure, right? If you're going to ever do a resolution or have an opportunity to reconcile, your intention has to be, we're not leaving until it's resolved, right? Not, I'm going to go in there and give you a slang, because now after 3 years, I'm going to finally make you pay. No, astaghfirullah, it's horrible. So your niyyah has to be right, that it's for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you want a resolution, you want to remove this feeling from your heart, right? And ask Allah for tawfiq, because inshallah, if you go with a beautiful intention that you really want to have, like repair the relationship, inshallah, Allah will give you tawfiq. But again, if you're going there just to get your, just desserts and punish someone for what they did to you however long ago, you're not going to have tawfiq. And that'll actually be now it's like compounded problems for you, right? So don't do that. But I think it's very important to, know your nature and see where where these shortcomings are that prevent you from following the prophetic example, because all of us are at different levels. We all have, different things that we need to work on to bring us, to align us with the prophetic example. And that's why if we don't know our nature and know what his example is, and how are we going to resolve that, right? We have to know both. You have to know your own temperament, your own personality, your own shortcomings, your own diseases, and then you study his example and say, what do I need to do to get there? Because that's ideal. His way is always ideal. And by sharing this hadith with us, he is giving us a very clear message. Do not go to sleep with ill feelings in your heart for people. And there's, I do counseling for couples. I mean, it's amazing. People can go to bed with the person next to them and absolutely have hatred for them, or resentment and rancor in their heart for their spouse. So what does that say to us? The person right next to you, right? Person right next to you, and you're going to be okay with that? You're just going to jump out of bed and go to work? How do you settle with those feelings in your heart? How do you live? How do you function? You should not. You should not want those feelings in your heart. You should say, that is toxic. And if it's my pride that stands in the way of me, having a resolution, I need to work on my pride. I don't want to apologize. Astaghfirullah, you hear people talk like that. Why should I apologize? Oh, okay, so you're going to have a cold war for weeks, months, over 2 words. How easy it is to say, I'm sorry, even if you're not wrong. But your niyyah is for the sake of Allah. Ya Allah, I just want to resolve this. And I've seen it happen where you can say the words I'm sorry just to kind of bring down the wall in front of you. And then what you do is you say, I'm going to do it that way. I mean, it's just little advice. You say I'm sorry for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And when the wall comes down, patiently, you address your hurt without pointing fingers. That's how you get justice. You don't need to point fingers, right? If it's like obvious that someone's wronged you, it's obvious to Allah, that's all that should matter to you. But having your day in court, where it's like, I want to, humiliate you and just get it all out to you, that's just not necessary sometimes. But addressing your pain is what's important, and that's what you should focus on. So address your pain, validate the hurt that was caused, instead of letting it be an opportunity for the nafs to just get their, a moment to attack back for whatever it was that you felt was done to you. That's a nafsi, shaitanic response, right, to do that. A response of emotional intelligence, of the prophetic example is, what? I'm just going to try to bring healing. First, for myself, because I feel wronged, without necessarily, exacerbating the issue and turning this into now it's just another sparring that we're doing, right? I'm just going to address the pain. But I'm going to be the wise one to say I'm sorry first. And inshallah, if you do it with that niyyah, I guarantee you by the end of that conversation, hopefully, unless you have someone who's really got an ego problem, you'll get your I'm sorry too. Even if it comes at the very end of the conversation, take it. Alhamdulillah. I said it in the beginning, you said it at the end, we're good, But don't let shaitan convince you that the only successful, exchange is if you get to lash out and punish this person for what they did to you. That's just total nafs, 100% nafs. I don't know how we got on that topic, sorry. This is the thing with this subject, it's like it can lead from, one thing to another. So, but we are talking about hatred. So again, what I was saying, yes, was that not to ever go to sleep or with the negative feelings in your heart, especially for people that are close to you, right? So the cure for hatred is pretty straightforward. If you have negative feelings towards someone, even if it's from your past, even if it's for, let's say, I'll be honest, there's a couple of celebrities that really annoy me because I just feel like they're not using their platform in a healthy way and they're misguiding millions of people. So there's times where I've had to be like, okay, I can't harbor negative feelings about them. I have literally made dua for them, literally made dua for their guidance, asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just, guide them to Islam, to the truth, to the haqq, alhamdulillah. But that's the kind of work we have to do. Even someone so far removed, like a celebrity that I'll likely never meet in my life, because I don't like the reflection it says about me, that I'm holding bad feelings in my heart towards someone. I really don't like it. I feel like it makes me feel icky, right? So if you have that, repulsion to the feeling itself, then that's the response. Sit and intentionally make dua for them. Ya Allah, give them hidayah, give them guidance. If they have wealth, let's say hasad is, a factor here. Force yourself to make wealth, a dua that Allah increases their wealth and that helps them use their wealth for good. You see what I'm saying? Whatever the source of your hasad is, try to push yourself to even go there, right? And ask that whatever, that you're asking for them obviously is for the sake of Allah and that they use it for khair. But push yourself to that point where you want to expel this feeling from your heart and you're willing to even go out on a limb and dedicate some of your du'as to them. Okay, that's the cure for it. When one does this with sincerity, hearts mend. If one truly wants to purify his or her heart and root out disease, there must be total sincerity and conviction that these cures are effective. So that's just kind of a general statement about every single treatment that we're talking about here. It has to be done sincerely. This isn't going to work. It's kind of like when you're given a protocol by your physician, take this medicine, for this many days. If you only take half of your antibiotic course, is it going to work? No. If you only take, I get in this debate with my husband all the time when he takes, it's so funny, but he gets migraines once in a while, and so he'll take, an Agil or something, but he literally cuts it in half. And I'm always like, what is the point of that? It's not going to work. But he really doesn't like to take medicine. I'm the same, so I get it, but I kind of tease him. I'm like, that's like you're taking the dosage for like a child. You realize you're a grown man, right? So, and then he'll of course wake up and he's like, the headache isn't gone. And I'm like, yeah, it's not gonna go away if you're taking half of the prescribed, Then to me it's totally pointless, because I'm like, you're putting all that in your body when you don't want to, but it's not even effective. So think of it that way. Like if you're approaching any of these treatments with not doing it fully or wholeheartedly, sincerely, they're not going to have an effect. So it's kind of pointless. But when you genuinely mean what you're saying and genuinely are doing it, then inshallah you're going to see the effect of it. Arguably, the disease of hatred is one of the most devastating forces in the world, but the force that is infinitely more powerful is love. Love is an attribute of God. Hate is not. A name of God mentioned in the Quran is al-Wadud, the loving one. Hate is the absence of love, and only through love can hatred be removed from the heart. In a profound and beautiful hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, none of you has achieved faith until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. So I think that's just really a beautiful way to, again, also address this, is that you want to fill your heart, look at it as a vessel. You want to fill it with love, right? And that's why that story of Sayyidina Isa is so powerful. It's one of my favorite stories, where he was walking by a group of men, and then they all cursed him. They started to curse him. And his response was to actually, greet them and make, dua for them. The greeting is, a dua. So his disciples were shocked, why'd you do that? They were cursing you. Why did you respond, so with a dua, with a proper greeting? And he said what? He said, vessels only pour out what they contain. Okay? So you want to look at yourself like, your heart is a reflection of what's inside of you. So you're a container, right? Your spiritual container. What is it filled with? If it's love, then that's all you got to give, right? If it's all of this other stuff, it's going to come out. But our purpose should be to remove all of the negative. Like, I want to remove all these dark things and have a vessel that's pure. And you can't do that if you don't address these diseases. So, beautiful hadith there. And then when the Prophet ﷺ says brother, this is also, Imam Al-Nawawi, he comments on this. So just to kind of, because again, Muslims can get into this mindset where all of our good is only for other Muslims. No. If you're a good person, you're a good person with everybody, right? It's not like, oh, just me and mine and then everybody else. I remember we'd sit in, I don't know how long ago it was, but it was a long time ago, and someone asked about that, like, well, like ghiba or, certain diseases of the heart, like, is it, what if it's like a non-Muslim? Like, what if it's a coworker? Like, are you allowed to make ghiba about, like, a coworker? As if the answer was going to change. You'd be like, yeah, as long as they're not Muslim, just go to town on them, spread the worst things about them. No, astaghfirullah. Because it's a sign of your heart, right? Like, you wouldn't think to do those things because you're not capable of it. That's really what you want to reach, that level where I'm not capable of doing harm to anybody, whether they're Muslim or not. It doesn't matter. It's just not part of my nature to do those things, right? And so in here, in this commentary, Imam Nawawi says what? We should interpret this as universal brotherhood, which includes Muslims and non-Muslims. For one should desire for his brother non-Muslim that he enters into the state of submission with his Lord, and for his brother Muslim, he should love for him the continuation of guidance and that he remain in submission. So yeah, if you have a coworker or someone, neighbor, there's people that we will have in our lives that are going to test us, but you want to always want the good for everybody, and that's what that hadith is. Want for your brother what you want for yourself, right? To really mean that sincerely. Okay, alhamdulillah. So you know what I'm going to do, because we only have a few minutes left, and I know we said we're going to get to 4, but I think we should stop because I want to hear from you guys if you have any questions in the remaining time that we have. So does anybody have any comments or questions sorry, I have some notes here. Let me actually quickly look. Oh, let me mention this, sorry. I'm using so many different sources, so I forgot to look at my file here. But this is also important to mention. So this is nasiha, prayer for the other. Whenever one feels hatred for another person, they should be supplicated for sincerely. Their name should be mentioned before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and one should ask that they are blessed with good tidings in this life and the next. Hatred is the absence of love, and only through love can hatred be removed. So there's a hadith. Imam Al-Ghazali actually said this. It's not a hadith, it's a quote. He said, to get what you love, you must first be patient with what you hate. So just an additional quote to think about and to reflect on, right? So whatever you love in this world, if you have a particular need, think of it this way, that the hatred in your heart is an obstacle to that love. So if you want something, if you have a yearning from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you have a need, a dua, you want to almost look at it like, I need to take care of this first before I have an expectation of getting this, right? I need to remove those things from my heart, and if it is towards another person, I have to, do that. And if I don't do that, then it's an obstacle between getting what I want from my Lord. So it's another incentive to work on this particular disease. Okay, alhamdulillah. Anything else anybody has a question? Yes?
An observation.
Sure.
Maybe we need to strike the word hate out.
Absolutely.
Replace it with dislike. I've heard that, and I'm not current, but in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always talks about He loves those who do good, but He does not love the one He is not.
Right.
And if we're to imbue His qualities, that should be our goal, right?
That's beautiful. Thank you. No, it's a beautiful response, mashallah. And it's true, because hatred is, and that's why, as I said with my children, I'm always like, don't use that word. It's such a negative word. And it's true, it's become so common, and we use it in everything. I hate that song, I hate that food, I hate this, I hate that. I agree. Like, you can, just be more selective in how you express it. Because words have power, words have meaning. And so if we get used to that binary, it's not an accurate binary, because it's probably, and this is why language also matters. When you learn, more descriptive words for your emotions, it does help to better identify what you're feeling. But if you're limited in your emotional vocabulary, and you just kind of use the same words over and over again, you're not doing, you're not accurately describing what you're feeling, but you're also, using words, you're weaponizing words that are really toxic, and they're not helpful. So I love that point. It's really beautiful. Just getting into that habit of just saying, I don't like that, I dislike that, instead of I hate that. So thank you. Excellent advice, mashallah. Anybody else? You guys are quiet today. Should we continue? You guys want to continue with iniquity? If you don't have questions, we still have time. Yeah? Yes? Yes.
Understand that sort of scientific study was reversed. Where would you start with the core temperament in terms of actual resources?
Sure. There's a book that our scholars advised us to get. It's called The Temperament That God Gave You. I think the author is LaFay. Tim LaFay, I think. Just, look up the temperament that God gave you. There are articles online also I've seen. If you did a search for like the 4 temperaments in Islam, there are articles that are written by Muslims that kind of go into the science. But that first resource is pretty comprehensive in terms of describing the science. But I think it's very helpful, because once you know your temperament and personality, and if you've heard any of my talks before, I'm a big advocate of the science, because I think it just helps help you with better understanding of yourself, but also relationships, because you start meeting people where they're at, instead of just projecting your ways and expectations onto them. It's like a vicious cycle, because that's what we do normally, right? Well, this is how I would do it, and if you don't do it that way, then I'm going to punish you. And everybody's doing that with each other, right? So we're like, we're never going to get satisfied that way. But if you say, you know what, I'm different, you're different, let's learn how to communicate with each other where we're at and be respectful and mutually respectful, it encourages healthier and relationships, and it fosters healthier relationships to do that, inshallah. Okay? All right, anybody else? I want to make sure I don't miss anybody. Yeah? All right, so let's go to the next one then, alhamdulillah. Iniquity. So, we'll read here. The disease of iniquity, according to the book of Opening of the Truth, is defined as harming a fellow creature without right. Its cause is the powerfully intoxicating wine, love of worldly position. So remember, if you wish to turn this intoxicant into useful vinegar, how many a leader achieved his heart's desire of rank and position, yet in the end, the devotee and his object of devotion were leveled to equal planes by death. Keep in mind that this desire is about turning away from your master towards his impoverished and miserly servants. Concern with the affections of others is exhausting, and though you may please some, others will flee from you filled with anger. Yet what is prohibited regarding the pleasure of others is what is procured by way of trickery, ostentatious display of religiosity, or hypocritical affectation. Know also that the seeker of their pleasure cannot expect the pleasure of God, the fashioner of creation, the mighty, the capable. As for the one whose heart is encrusted with the love of this world, his only cure is having certainty of his mortality. Thus, if he keeps death constantly before his eyes, this acts as a cleanser for the soiled matter encrusting the heart. Iniquity is defined according to Shaykh Muhammad, the author of the book The Opening of the Truth, as harming anything in creation without just cause. The word is a translation of baghi, which is derived from the Arabic word that denotes desire. In this context, the problem is desiring something to the point of transgressing the rights of others to attain it. So, again, kind of what we were saying earlier, by any means necessary, because you want a position of power, you want wealth, you want status, you're willing to harm others. This is iniquity. That you're willing to transcend clear boundaries of right and wrong, or wrong, to get right what you want, because it's that important to you. Okay? The iniquity and injustice that people aim at others ultimately works against the perpetrators, right? Because in the Quran, Allah says, "Oh, you people, surely your iniquity is but against yourselves." And then Imam Maulud goes on to make this analogy between iniquity and a powerfully intoxicating wine called qarqaf, right? So here's this wine that people drink, but it makes them shudder. It's very hard to drink, right? So in the end, it's it's harming them, but they still drink it. So this is a metaphor for the love of position, which is a major motivation that impels some to wrong others. So this is about power, right? People who are in positions of power can fall into this, where they are, again, willing to climb over people, step on the necks and backs of people to get what they want and harm, and not really care. They do it with impunity because their love of desire, their love of power is just so high, and their love of the dunya, right? Because it's all connected. It's all, usually the power is connected to love of material wealth as well, right? It's like whatever, it's all, that's your incentive to do what you do. So, but what you do is you harm other people in the process, not realizing that you're actually harming yourself in the end. And that's what that verse is about, right? And so he goes on to describe the world's most powerful leaders, right? They'll do anything to achieve power, even, harm other people, right? But at the end, what happens? What's the equalizer? What brings us? We're all gonna die and face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So in the end, you can sit here and do all this to acquire, but you have to realize you're going to meet your maker. And is it worth it? Is it worth, going through all of those, doing so much harm to other people just to get power, when in the end you're going to turn to dust, and then you're going to be held accountable for everything you did. So that's really, the reminder there. And here that at the bottom of that section, attaining nearness to God does not involve wronging others. On the contrary, access to the source of all power requires a character that is selfless, compassionate, and sensitive to the right of others. Right? So if you want power and you're willing to harm other people, then that's what you're going to get maybe in this life. And you see people do it all the time. But if you want nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you have to understand you can't have both. You can't harm people and then still want nearness to Allah. It just doesn't work that way. You have to be a compassionate, fair, just person in order to gain nearness to Allah. So iniquity just doesn't, there's no place for it in the heart of the believer. The Imam states that the desire for temporal power is a move away from God, besides whom there is no power or might, and a move towards His creation. So whenever we want power, and that's why if you seek power and you want position, you are in a way making a choice. Right? It's one thing to be assigned in those positions or given opportunities in those positions, elected, you know what I mean, in those positions, but to actually want it and you have a yearning for it, this is considered, a reflection of a disease in the heart, because nobody should want leadership and power. It's a big amana. It's a trust, and it comes with a lot of responsibility. But those who seek it usually are seeking it for the wrong reasons, right? They're seeking it because of notoriety, fame, wealth, power, all of the stuff that comes with being recognized and being known. And we're going to get to those diseases in the coming sessions. But just an important note there. Vain pursuits wear out the soul. A person who endeavors to please people and gain their love, admiration, or approval will exhaust himself. And that's just, a deterring, commentary there, that if that's what, you want, remember, it's going to come at a price. And that's why a lot of people who are in politics, let's say, or who have, positions of power, it is an exhausting thing. And they are worn down, they're not healthy people, generally speaking. They have, a lot of issues, personal issues in their homes and their families, because it comes with a price, right? The great Muslim scholar Ibn Ata'illah said, if you desire immortal glory, seek glory in the immortal. That's beautiful, right? So, just a change in perspective. Don't seek to be recognized in this dunya. Seek to be recognized by the one, because that's all that matters. You can have, and this is a big problem with our society now, because everybody's trying to be an influencer, right? That's like a common, everybody knows that word, right? What's an influencer? Huh? This is like whatever, especially the young generation. It's sad because you see, so many people accumulating a lot of power and wealth almost overnight, one video, right? It's like one simple exchange they had or video that went viral suddenly opened the doors for a lot of power. And you have young people, with millions and millions of dollars. And then, there's been so many stories over the years of how they display their wealth, and it's all about flying all over the world, and the cars that they buy and the homes that they buy and brand names, because it opens the door, for, it's just the world that they've, unfortunately, I'm talking about the younger generation that they've entered, where this is so common that it's very attractive, right? Who wants to go to college and go to years to medical school or law school or this school, or engineering school, when you could just become, YouTuber, an influencer, have some, gimmick that you do, and potentially make millions overnight. So you see a lot of people shifting their life focus, their trajectory completely. They drop out of school, they're not working. And it's not just here in the US, like all over the world. It's very, very common to see this happening with younger people because it's so appealing and so attractive, right? So seeking notoriety and fame, we're going to get to that as well, but that's why this quote is powerful. Like, if you want that, just seek to be known by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for He's the only one that really matters. And so, similarly to the other diseases, the treatment for this is to reflect on death. Again, to know that it's all going to come to an end. Your wealth will wither away. And that's why the woman that I mentioned earlier in my story, the homeless woman, her story to me was quite powerful. I actually looked her up later, and researched her. She was pretty well known in her, area of tech that she was working on. I saw her name, I saw all these pages on her. And she still periodically messages me here and there. Like every few months I'll get an email update from her. She had a brain injury, so she's cognitively impaired. But I think about that, subhanAllah, that she was at one point a very affluent woman. She had millions, she had a title, she had a name, she had a business. And it was all taken away, and we hear these stories. We hear the opposite a lot, rags to riches, but they're also riches to rags. So either Allah can take that away from you in this world, if you're the type that abuses people to get what you want, or, a'udhu billah, you'll be debased in the next world. But at the end of the day, if you reflect on death enough, it should make you not yearn for these positions, yearn for power, because you realize, like, it's all, I don't want to be held accountable. I don't want to stand before my Lord, right? In trouble. Yes?
Do you think that, she had like this wonderful lifestyle? Do you think that this happened to her so God can teach her a lesson? Or anything?
Yeah, Allah knows, everybody's situation is different. But one thing I will mention is, subhanAllah, she, in every email she ever sends me, she'll send me a verse of the Quran. And she'll say, Assalamu alaikum. She's, I don't know if she's professed Islam, but my exchanges with her she's very reflective of God now. And, God, Allah knows, but sometimes that's the outcome, right? Someone who didn't have any spiritual, life before might suddenly become very aware. And she's mentioned many times that Muslims are the best people. They've always treated her very well. and she's very grateful for her time spent in the Middle East. She actually lived in the Middle East for a while. So you never know. Maybe this is a source of her guidance to Islam, and may Allah accept her, her and guide her, inshallah. So, but we can't assume to know why things like that happen to people, because that's totally not our call. Allah can guide some people in this way, or He can punish them and purify them, before the akhirah, which is one of the great blessings of being a Muslim, is that we know that our, will be held accountable in this world as a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that we are not held accountable in the next life. So that's why tribulations, there's great blessings in tribulations. And if you want to, there's a really great talk that Shaykh Hamza did called the 17 blessings of tribulations, or benefits of tribulations. It should be on YouTube. But it goes into all, it just gives you a shift in perspective. Like if you've gotten, if you've had any hardship, suffered any loss, financially or a personal, loss of someone you cared for, maybe you have a diagnosis that's, terminal, or just something that would be considered a tribulation, that there is a way to see the silver lining once you shift your focus and look at it through that metaphysical lens, through the lens that we should all look at everything in. The dunya lens is very limited, right? The lens of the dunya will only focus on what's in front of you, but the metaphysical lens sees the bigger picture, right? That there's always, nothing happens in vain. There's always a reason why things happen. And ultimately, if you have that trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you feel content with whatever it is, because you know your Lord is the most just, He's the most merciful of the merciful, and if He's trying you in this world, there is a good reason for that, and that you just have to submit and surrender. So it kind of helps you to gain that perspective. But yeah, that's a good talk to listen to, inshallah. Yes?
I just was struck when I read
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Very strongly almost encouraged. People almost
oh yeah.
felt that you should be doing that. And it's so opposite to, I just find just the challenge of being a society where people normalize that is
right. No, you're 100% right. And actually, we mentioned Ayn Rand, I think. I don't know if it was it in this class? Did I mention Ayn Rand? So if you look up her theories, they call it, it's amazing to me, they call it this, ethical egoism. I was like, isn't that like ironic? I don't know how because it's all about self-service. And there is that sort of Machiavellian approach to you do you get what you need, right? Whatever you need, and forget about everybody else that you have to burn along the way. There is definitely that sentiment out there. And you're right, it's getting more and more popular as people pull away from religion, organized religion or faith, and they don't really have a sense of accountability to a higher creator. It's all about serving the self, the needs of the self. So if it comes at, oh well, so-and-so, I had to, for example, promotions up at work, and I had to throw a coworker under the bus because I want to get promoted. Oh well, people do things like that, because in their mind they think it's fine. If you have to do what you have to do to get ahead, that's okay. But this is the kind of, philosophy that's become very, very popular in our world, which is all about serving the nafs.
Specifically here, that has led to such a lack of compassion that disparities that we see.
Absolutely.
Many other countries, at least growing up in Europe, even though religiosity was not as much as it supposedly is in the U.S., that effect is just so evident.
Subhanallah. And that's why it's important to travel, right? Because you can see the stark, contrasts, that the way that other societies live. And this is a problem, right? It's not healthy. And iniquity, by the way, we're talking kind of like in positions of power and maybe looking at more like, leadership roles or roles, professional roles. But I think also in our homes we have to look at this too, because in the marital context or even with children, you can have this manifest, right? Children, for example, are, I think in many cultures, seen as little, minions. And, and astaghfirullah, it's almost like no big deal to talk down to them, to disrespect them, to treat them as sub, because, whatever, it's just a child. This is not Islam. That's not our tradition at all. Children should be honored, they should be respected, their rights should be given, they should be spoken to with respect. But you see a lot of really disrespectful way of engaging children, where it's like their intellect is, not recognized. Oh, what do you know? You're just a kid. Or they're not, they're just, their rights aren't fully given. So this is also another problem, is in many of our homes this can happen. And the same between a husband and wife. You see some spouses, unfortunately, abusing their power, whether it's, intellectually, spiritually, financially, but they're, they're just, they're abusing their position to gain more power in that relationship. And I've seen this in many times happen in homes. So we can look at it on a micro level or a macro level, but the problem is it's everywhere around us. And we have to ask ourselves, what, first of all, why do I want positions of power if I want them? What is the end game? What's the purpose of it? Whether it's in your like work area or professional, home life, or just in the community or in the world, if you're seeking fame, if you're seeking to have some again, position, that's the first question, why? Sit with that for a moment. Really ask yourself, what is it that I want? Because if it comes to, again, all the things we mentioned, which is love of dunya, and notoriety and fame, those come at real serious costs. And we're going to get to that as we talk about those diseases of the heart, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. Yes, did I have any questions here? No? Thought I saw a hand. Okay, anybody else? All right, alhamdulillah. So we will cover, inshallah, for the next week. Let's read through love of the world, envy, which is going to be a really big one. So make sure you read all of them. Blameworthy, modesty, fantasizing, and we'll try to do fear of poverty. So let's do all of those, inshallah. We can get through them, hopefully all. Okay? Alhamdulillah. Oh, is it? Okay, sorry. Let me go to the new book. Okay. If their order is different. Oh, wow, they changed the order, huh? Okay. So love of world, envy, blameworthy modesty, fantasizing, fear of poverty. It's not the same? Is this the same? Are you looking at the contents? So we just ended on iniquity, and then after that should be love of the world, right? Envy, blameworthy modesty, fantasizing, and fear of poverty. It's the same? No, it's okay. If it sounded off, I'm sorry. Gotcha. Okay. So we'll do all of those, inshallah, for next week. And please, come prepared with any questions. Oh, I'm sorry, in 2 weeks, next week, I'm sorry, I have a family event, so I'm not able to be here, but inshallah, in 2 weeks, okay? Jazakallah. Actually, I'm thinking, should we have more reading, because you got 2 weeks now. We won't cover probably all of them, but you're more than welcome to continue reading all the way to seeking reputation, because that's what we just talked about, right? We talked about seeking reputation, so we can maybe come back full circle to that one, all right? Alhamdulillah, jazakallah khairan. We'll go ahead and end in dua, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا حبيبنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Jazakumullah khairan. Inshallah, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you. For sisters, if you're here, an amazing class is happening in the conference room. That's why we're out here. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's with Ustadha Iman Sidqi from Southern California. She is a gem, an incredible storyteller. I highly advise you to register. They have lunch if you have time, but check her out. She's really incredible. I'm actually eager to go in there. So, jazakallah khairan. Okay, assalamu alaikum.